going to take my mask off. I'd just like to say a massive Borada to Tony, who I know is watching online. Hi, Tony! Or should I say bonjour? I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Welcome to everybody, whether you're English, Welsh, or French. Right, Transforming Lives for Good is a national charity that exists and works in partnership with the local church. Everything TLG does is to equip the local church to bring a hope and a future to the lives of struggling children, which is worked out and shown through the 3 programs that they run, which we'll go into later. Being trained by TLG, then preparing you with a specific sermon, giving you the motivation and means by which to talk up for them, is a great privilege. And so I'm going to use that sermon today. I'm going to open in the way that I would if I was at a new church and not on home turf, giving you a bit of my story and the way and the work they do, encouraging you, I hope, to think and pray about new challenges and adventures, and hopefully plant a seed for making a difference. So, background. I was born and brought up in a very loving Christian family, with my parents and grandparents being very strong in their faith. The story goes that I was just 2 weeks old when I made my first visit to church in my pram. Then the day before my 8th birthday, my life changed. My dad died after a 9-month battle with cancer. Mum was a widow at the age of 35, with 2 children, aged just 8 and my brother just 5, to bring up. It must have been a huge struggle for her, one which I can't even begin to imagine. Mum, I know you're watching online today, but I just want to say a huge thank you, and I love you. Throughout those difficult days and for years to come, God's love was poured out beyond measure to us. From the neighbour, Mrs. Jones, who'd bring a cake over every Sunday morning without fail, to the hampers left on our doorstep at Christmas, generous friends who'd always include us in their family stuff, the gifts we used to receive of people we'd never even met for birthdays and Christmases, the teachers that spent that extra time with me, taking me under their wing. God was in all of that, working through all of those people, whether they realised it or not. Not long after my dad died, I gave my life to Jesus, and I've been walking hand in hand with him ever since. He has been a good and constant father in my life, loving me, supporting me, guiding me, correcting me when needed, and challenging me all the time. I've done a variety of roles, working with children over the years, Sunday schools, youth clubs, teaching assistants, and not to mention raising those 4 on the front row as well. Working in all of these different settings, I've seen firsthand the struggles that many face in the classroom and at home. I knew that more needed to be done. I first came across TLG about 4 years ago and immediately felt the love that was in the charity, the way they spoke up for struggling children and really made a difference in their lives. The Bridge Church has had the privilege of partnering with TLG now for the past 2 years through the Early Intervention Project. I really believe that my involvement with TLG is a accumulation of the journey I've been on and the heart God has given me. I'm one of the blessed ones, the one who had support and help. But what about those who currently don't know that love or feel that support? Who's there for them? Right, let's read Psalm 107, verses 1 to 16. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Those he gathered from the lands, from east and west, from north and south. Some wandered in desert wastelands, finding no way to a city where they could settle. They were hungry and thirsty, and their lives ebbed away. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way to a city where they could settle. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. For he satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. Some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners suffering in iron chains, because they rebelled against God's command and despised the plans of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor, and they stumbled, and there was no one to help them. They cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He brought them out of the darkness, the utter darkness, and broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. For he breaks down gates of bronze and cuts through bars of iron. If I say the word chains to you, what do you think of? What do you visualize? More often than not, chains are used to restrict, to contain, to hold down, to hold back. But when we speak in spiritual terms, chains can mean all of the same things. I want you to picture in your head a child that you know and love. Now imagine that child with the heavy chain of hunger hanging over their shoulders. The chain of an angry parent draped across them. The chains of illness and worry binding their hands. The chain of a mum and dad splitting up across their chest. The restrictive chain of lies people have spoken over them, wound tightly around their head. Now can you visualize how heavy those chains can be? How they could affect every area of a child's life? Now can you see why it isn't fair to expect the same responses, behaviour, achievement and attitude from a child with all of that? Did you know that there are 4.1 million children living in relative poverty in our country? 1 in 3 parents from low-income families have said they regularly miss a meal so that their children can eat. 1 in 10 children feel unable to cope with a school day. 2/3 of children say they worry all of the time. These statistics are pre-COVID. Can you even begin to imagine how those already like that are feeling today? Those who've had a year at home now facing going back into the school setting. How much more are those feelings going to be heightened and exaggerated over the next months and years? But today, we are proclaiming a God whose love knows no bounds, and we are praising him for his son Jesus who sets us free. In the Bible, there are countless stories that feature chains, whether physically, spiritually, or metaphorically. The hindrance of chains comes up time and time again. In Exodus chapter 1, the nation of Israel is enslaved to the Egyptians. The Israelites didn't choose these chains. They didn't do anything that deserved that level of oppression. And yet they were subject to a life where they were weighed down and restricted. For a generation of children growing up in our country today, it is all they know to feel weighed down, restricted and bound by the chains of circumstances that they didn't choose and they can't cope with. More often than not, there's no awareness that life can be different and no awareness of a God who is loving enough to set them free. There were 438,265 exclusions of children in the UK for the academic year 2018 to 2019. The overwhelming most common reason given for those exclusions was persistent disruptive behaviour. Could it be that what we see as bad behaviour in children is actually just a strained communication method for a young person so weighed down and unable to cope? So how does a God whose love knows no bounds respond to all of that? Well, as we read through the story of Exodus from chapter 7, we see one of the most powerful displays of who God is and how much he loves his children. The story of Exodus is God showing up in all his power and delivering the Israelites as they call on his name. He physically, spiritually, and emotionally breaks the chains that hold them back and sets them free. In Hosea 11, verses 1 to 4, God says, When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking him by the arms, but they did not realize it was I who healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with ties of love. We believe God has a father heart, and his love knows no bounds for these children. He is desperate to break their chains and set them free. Only in Jesus do we have someone who has defeated every oppression that has ever existed. Only Jesus gave his life so that we can be welcomed into the kingdom chain-free. Thank God for Jesus, who breaks down gates of bronze and cuts down bars of iron. The TLG journey began with one struggling, way down teacher called Lewis. Under the chain of a very angry home life, Lewis struggled to cope and had been excluded from school time and time again. When Lewis started coming along to the local church youth club, the youth leaders knew they had to do more to support Lewis, and so TLG was born. You can read more of Lewis's story and the way which TLG was born by this fantastic book, which I've got lots of copies on and is absolutely free. So if you would like a copy to read about the full story of TLG, then please just let me know and I'll deliver it to you. Fast forward just over 20 years, and God has raised up over 220 churches from across the country, reaching over 10,000 struggling children and families through one of TLG's programs. Education centres. There are 13 of these throughout the country that put the local church at the centre of lives of teenagers who are at crisis point, struggling under the weight of chains. Make Lunch, a holiday feeding programme which equips churches to lift off the chain of hunger, feeding the 1 in 5 children facing food insecurity in this country. And then Early Intervention, which is how we partner with TLG here at the Bridge Church. It's designed to put a church volunteer alongside a struggling primary school child for 1 hour each week. For that hour, the burden of those chains will be supported and shared. Through chatting, craft, just designated one-on-one time, you can see the change over the weeks and months. From February 2019 to February 20, the TLG team here supported 11 children and families, giving 293 hours of time for these children. Things have looked very different for us as a team, obviously, this past year. With the end of coaching years, some of our coaches felt it was time for a break. Some of them faced other commitments and so have put TLG on hold for now. But some have continued, and even during lockdown, we've had contact with some of the families throughout this time. And we've been building really strong relationships with our local schools. There are now 2 coaches with children who are ready to restart when their classes go back. Yay, Jenny Bruce. With 3 more coaches patiently waiting for restrictions to lower so they can start with new children. Big shout out to Paul Edwards, who this week completed his online training and is now ready to start his TLG journey. Thank you, Paul. Can't wait to get you started. Now, as part of the pitch and plea in normal circumstances, I'd probably get a few coaches up to tell you what a wonderful opportunity is, what you get out of it yourself, and all of that. But instead of that, I'm going to show you a quick clip today of a coach called Oscar after his very first coaching session. So please meet Oscar.
Hello everybody, my name is Oscar, says it on my TLG name tag. So today, something incredible happened. Today is my first day as a coach with TLG, and it was actually my first day out on the school coaching. I met up with a young person, we had a 1 hour session, and when I came out of that session, boy, was I filled with joy. That 1 hour went by so quick. You know when they say that the best is always yet to come? I believe that I got a taste of the best. Now, TLG offered me this opportunity to sit down with a young person and just connect with them at their level. I mean, the fun that we had. Just meeting the young person, in a few moments, we kicked it off. Like, we connected so good and so well that we never took notice of time. We were playing games, we were talking stories, we were finding out about each other. Man, it was great. It was great. I left that school, I phoned up my coordinator and I was like, why didn't I know about TLG earlier? Honestly, it's been such a great experience, especially for 2020. This is one thing that has brought joy to me, being a coach with TLG and getting into schools.
I can't guarantee a reaction quite like Oscar's when you get paired with a child, although you don't really know. All of the teaching we have had over the past month has been spurring us on through the book of Habakkuk, showing us that God is painting a much bigger picture that we are a part of. Despite what we are going through, the importance of looking up and looking forward, which tied in brilliantly to Brad's encouraging word on community a few weeks ago, in which a fantastic quote came through, Brad. If you want influence, you have to have involvement. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to be an influence for God in this community. I want God to use me, not just to grow TLG, but for all of the different things that are in the pipeline, things yet to be even dreamed. There are many ways to be involved, many ways to have an influence. TLG early intervention is just one of those ways. I'm quite biased, and I think that early intervention is a great and fantastic and easy way to get involved. It takes up a little over an hour a week, term time only. Full resources are provided. No teaching or knowledge of primary children is needed. It really is just simply about getting to know a child, listening and being there for them for that hour a week. And the schools, well, they love it. They have seen firsthand the difference it makes, the impact it has on the child and the family. They are as keen for us to get going again as we are. I know that early intervention won't be for everyone, but there is a place for everyone to have an influence. Whether that's having a dream that sparks a conversation with the community team, practically getting involved with a project, helping to set something up behind the scenes, being a prayer partner that covers us and the projects we are doing in prayer. The list goes on. If anything you've heard today has had an impact, got you thinking, then just continue to seek God and ask him to speak to you and guide you. Sometimes all we need to feel is that small nudge from God, and then to boldly step out and let him do the rest. If early intervention is something that you'd like to know more about, then please get in touch with me. I'd love to show you the materials we work from, chat in greater deal about it, and tell you about some of the children that we have been coaching and the families we've had an impact on. As a charity, TLG are passionate and committed about reaching as many families and children as they can. Their vision is to enable churches to be the light in the darkness, to be there for these struggling children, to ensure that every child who needs help receives that help, and local churches begin to experience the ripples of transformation for generations to come. By 2025, they want to be supporting 10,000 children every single year through partnership with the local church. If partnering with TLG financially or prayerfully is something you'd be interested in, then again, please let me know and I can pass on all of the relevant forms and information. Thank you for listening today. To all of the coaches who've given their time this past year, 18 months, thank you. For all of those who have been prayer partners to coaches, thank you. As a church, thank you for encouraging us and supporting us on this journey. A thought to leave you all with as I finish today. We heard from Brad a few weeks ago in his sermon. God's plan for Bulwark and Thornwall is us. So, the question I am leaving you with today is, what can you do to be a part of that plan? Thank you for listening. Thank you.